Good afternoon.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm hanging in there best I can. May I ask you please to tell us your name?
My name is Amanda Liimatainen.
Very nice name. I like that. Liimatainen. Did I get it right?
You did. You
Right.
did. Very good.
Thank you so much for that. And may I ask you to share a little bit about yourself? Tell us a little bit, whatever you feel comfortable sharing about yourself.
Well, let's see. I am a human resources professional
Okay.
with over 20 years of very general experience in HR that's varied along my career. And I am a wife and a mother with two children, a high school sophomore and a middle school sixth grader, two boys. And my husband and I, have lived in North Carolina for just over 18 years. And I don't necessarily sound like I came from North Carolina. So I'm originally from Michigan. I was born in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which is a very different area than North Carolina, and grew up primarily in the Mitten. So people from Michigan always point to their hand when they're talking about where they're from. So I grew up in Ottawa County, which is between Grand Rapids and Grand Haven, Michigan, near the coast of Lake Michigan, and then lived there for the first 19 years of my life, then relocated to Wisconsin. So lived in Milwaukee for 7 years, and then made my way south to a little bit nicer weather, in my opinion. Although today is that's questionable.
It's questionable.
Questionable.
Excellent. So is North Carolina home, or is this just you still go back and forth between here and Michigan? Is there something you could say about that?
North Carolina is home. Michigan is where I'm from, so I probably have some stereotypical Midwestern words that I use or behaviors. Midwest nice is I haven't figured out yet if that's like a
Okay.
or a bless your heart Southern sort of thing, but kind of Midwest values, work ethic, and I still have family in Michigan, including my in-laws. So we do go back to visit, but North Carolina is home.
Absolutely, and it's a wonderful place to have as home, isn't it?
It is.
I will say one of those things you said about bless your heart. Growing up in the South, that was always a term of endearment to people who we consider stupid.
Right. Right.
One of those things like, okay, bless your heart, you don't know no better.
Right. And that's where the Midwest, like when people say that someone is Midwest nice, what does that really mean?
Exactly. So it's one of those things where, people are, it's so, they often within the Black and brown culture, they always say we code switch. We speak multiple languages, so we have the language we speak with our friends and our family, and then we have the language we speak when we're in the public domain. So those little terms like bless your heart, those little anecdotal phrases that have become part of the vernacular have really a lot of people don't know what they mean. So when somebody says bless your heart, you think you're saying something nice about them, but you really aren't.
Right.
So,
that's actually a term that I haven't adopted after years of living here, but I do. The verbiage that I use changes depending on who I'm speaking to, and my accent varies greatly. So you can usually tell when I've gone back to Michigan or spent a large amount of time speaking to someone from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, because usually people say, "Oh, are you from Canada?" We draw out our O's, so you'll hear me say no or a. I do say a, but I also say y'all, and I have used them both in the same sentence, which it doesn't work well together, but it happens.
I don't know what y'all means. So I grew up in the South. So I was born up north, but I still don't know what y'all means. So, does that mean you and everybody else, or is that something else? Just one of the things where you get lost in that, the language, right? So I hear a lot of people say y'all. I try never to say it. I mean, it may slip in my vocabulary every once in a while, but I try never to say it because I don't know what it means, you know?
I use it as a collective group. So being from the Midwest, I grew up saying you guys, you guys, you guys,
Yeah.
all the time. And I've really tried to work really hard at removing you guys from my vocabulary because it's not inclusive language.
Yep.
And it can be offensive to some people. So I have replaced it some with y'all. I do say folks a lot, which probably makes me sound, hokey, but I'd rather sound hokey than make someone feel excluded from a conversation that I'm having with them.
Absolutely. And I would just say at the end of the day, I don't think you owe anyone any justification for the words you use. You use whatever you feel comfortable. If you're not intentionally trying to hurt somebody, whatever words you use, you feel comfortable using, you should use. Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks. Tell me what it means that you are an HR executive. What does that mean in English?
Oh, I did not use the word executive.
I promoted you. I just gave you a promotion.
You just promoted me. Thank you. I did recently get promoted, but I'm not technically an executive. Maybe experience-wise I am, but by job title, I'm not. So human resources encompasses so many aspects of people at work, and it's really evolved over the years. I'm thankful to look younger than I am. I am in my mid-40s. And so I do have, as I mentioned earlier, over 20 years of HR experience, but that's really changed over the years. So it started as an HR assistant. So I was, the individual that would onboard someone and create their files, and when I say files, I mean paper, and be responsible for that and verify credentials if that was a requirement for. I started working in healthcare, and so there's a lot of credential verification in healthcare, and so that's what I did in the beginning, and then that evolved to a generalist role. And what that means in human resources is that you do all the things. It means you're a Jill of all trades, anything related to employment. So it could be recruiting, the actual act of hiring, compensation and benefits administration, court cases related to employment law. If there's an EEO case brought to your employer, then that would be something that you as a generalist would be responsible for. Even like unemployment, so working with on behalf of the employer if there's a case for unemployment and whether or not the employer is going to pay for that. And then eventually it evolved for me into a very deep focus in recruiting. And I mentioned healthcare. That's really where I grew up. My mother was a nurse. And she told me, do anything you want to do, but don't be a nurse. That was in the 80s, before the nursing profession was headed in the direction that it's in now. And I started volunteering before labor laws were what they are now, and was very comfortable in healthcare. So that's where my expertise was. And if you look at where I work now, you probably say, well, wait a second, like, where did all this healthcare, how did you move into a technology company? I work for IBM. And of course, all of my statements are my own opinions. But IBM recruited me because of my healthcare expertise, because of a contract that they had in their RPO space, which is recruitment process outsourcing for the average individual. So basically, a company will use another company to help them hire people. And because of my expertise in healthcare, that's why they came after me, and it was intriguing to me. So I came aboard, and in the last 7 years, my job has deeply changed. So IBM does have some work in healthcare, obviously through that RPO situation, and then also with Watson Health. So if you're familiar with artificial intelligence and Watson and that whole piece, there's Watson for oncology, clinical trial matching, and so on. So I worked in that space for a while as well, hiring. And now I am on the complete opposite end of the experience spectrum and supporting IBM's relationship with PTech, which is Pathways in Technology, Early College, High School.
I think I'm familiar with most of those terms. So many centuries ago, I worked for IBM. It was probably back in the dark ages when they had requirements on what you could and couldn't wear, what you could and couldn't do. You know, couldn't wear red fingernail polish. You couldn't wear but 3 colors of outfits. No, you know, I don't even want to go there. That was just how long ago that was. Thank you. That's behind us. So one of the things that I find absolutely remarkable about HR, considering what they are charged to do. So as you described so eloquently, the role of HR, how is it the least transparent organization in the organization? I mean, like everything is wrapped in secrecy, right? So how much a person makes, what that person's promotion, you know, anything that you could bring that is, you know, lawsuits, all of it's wrapped in this nice cellophane with some kind of duct tape wrapped around it so that there's no chance you're going to get in it to see what it is. Why is that HR has so much secrecy attached to it?
That's a great question. I don't know that I'm the right person to answer that. And I say that because I don't always know why there's secrecy in an organization when it comes to HR. The way that I view the world is that I'm going to protect people's information because that's something that I should do as a good steward of any human. So like I don't verify employment of who works at IBM and that sort of thing, unless they've asked me to be a reference, and that's a whole separate ball of wax. I think that we are seeing a trend in more transparency, especially as it relates to pay. And that's, I say we, like we as society, and the pressure that we're putting on organizations to do that. And I am a fan of that transparency because it shouldn't be a secret what people make, or I don't know, in an organization, what lawsuits are brought against that space. Because I currently work in a very large organization, as you know, my world is, although it's big, it's very small because it's very focused on the relationships and avenues to be able to allow individuals access to learning, earn and learn opportunities, jobs, and so on.
Are you familiar with ATS in HR?
Applicant tracking systems? Absolutely.
So again, and this is a diversity chat, and I will be frank with you. I spent a lot of time researching ATS, you know, and some of the things that I have come to know, specifically with the move to more automation of these systems, where it's less human interaction and more computer, you know, checking and selecting, you know, the candidate that meets all the requirement of the job. And if you listen to any of my chats, you've heard me say this before. I had done a talk for a national organization a year or two ago, and one of the gentlemen in the room, we were talking about diversity, of course, that's all I ever talk about. But anyway, one of the gentlemen in the back of the room stood up and said, I have a hack for all of you. And everybody turned around and looked at him. He said, from now on, when you apply for a job, copy and paste the entire job description at the bottom of your resume. He said, it's guaranteed to get you through the ATS system. And I was thinking, no, that's not a bad hack right there. That's a pretty good hack. But the problem with it is that these things do include bias. They do have methods that kind of eliminate people, you know. So if you are at IBM and you're hiring for, I don't know what it is, but you're hiring for, so you want to look at this person worked at a company like IBM, or you want to look at this person has this kind of degree. You talked about your background in healthcare. So there are all these little gotchas in these systems that kind of leave some of the best qualified people out because they haven't met these little check boxes that the algorithm is running through looking for, you know. So like, you know, did they do this? Did they do that? Why is this person over that person? And then to further extrapolate that, you know, so if the person is a minority or an underrepresented group, you know, so their names, you know, so, you know, there's the always argued people whose names end in A, or, you know, first name in A, or people whose names sound ethnic, or people whose names sound Muslim or whatever it is, Asian, whatever it is. It's always something in those systems that has those little checkbox, and somebody has to internally go into that system and turn that checkbox on or turn that checkbox out, i.e. you went to a historically Black college, check that box off or check that box on. It doesn't matter, or we don't care where you went to school at, what part of the world do you need to be relocated to this place. All of those little pieces that's weaning people out. So as an example, an ATS, you have a job for one of the more popular jobs in IT is customer support representative or analyst or whatever. So that's one of those jobs that there are massive amounts of jobs in that area, and then massive amounts of people who apply for it, right? And people say, well, I never got a call back and I made all the criteria of the job, because there's some mechanism that was turned on that you didn't meet, or that was turned off that you did, whatever it is that was able to exclude you. So as I started doing my research about this, specifically in a way to understand why minorities were not represented, because as you probably know, there is a lot of talk about Black and brown people in leadership roles, Black and brown people paid equitably, Black and brown people hired into certain jobs, women, all of these things are out there, and you always come back to the same place. What thing is preventing that? And there was an article by a woman in New York Times. It asked the question, why do we not have more Black and brown faculty? And she said it so elegantly, simply because we do not want them. And, if you dissect that sentence that she says, I'll send you the article if you're interested, but if you dissect that statement, it's just so profound to think it's just simply we don't want them. So then if you take it back to technology, how do you eliminate them so you don't have to have them? Or do you bring them in for the cursory interview and then say, no, you weren't the candidate we were looking for, you are not the right one?
There are so many things that you touched on. Applicant tracking systems vary. Yes, I do have experience with applicant tracking systems. I'm not in a situation now where I hire or use applicant tracking systems as a recruiter. So I'm not necessarily involved in the evolution of what the applicant tracking systems do. And speaking just from a broad experience perspective, when you post a position like the one that you referenced, where you would get a very large volume of applications, there's usually one recruiter in whatever organization it is that's responsible for that role. And now they have 1,000 people that applied to it. Frankly, as someone who's worked in talent acquisition, if you're a recruiter that doesn't shut off your job posting so that you can control the flow of individuals, then that's your fault. And you have the responsibility to review every single one of the people who apply. Some systems do have a built-in like filter matching, whatever behind the scenes that says, oh, this person is a 50% match for your requirements on your job. That's changed, and I'm not sure with each of the different applicant tracking systems that are out there what capabilities there are that are legal capabilities that you can use. Mm-hmm. But there's a human on the other side that should be reviewing those applications. When I was recruiting, that's what I did. I didn't, sort them alphabetically and then choose to do a, whatever portion of the alphabet, or the top 5 people that came through, or what I thought were the top 5 people. If I had qualified individuals for the roles that I owned, then I shut off my job posting, because otherwise it's unfair.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that, I think it's taking less and less control away from individuals such as yourself. I think the ATSs are like another one of those things that are going to be automated, and sooner or later they don't need a human being to do that. The problem with there being, so as a hiring manager, I can tell you, so my recruiter may send me 50 applications, and just as you said, I've got to go through each one and justify why we didn't hire that person, or why we didn't interview that person, which is mind numbing, but yet still so. But when you look at the racial, gender, and sexual orientation makeup of most companies, you will find that either that person or that ATS has done something to not allow this to happen. One of the things I hear a lot is we don't hire Black and brown people because we don't get any qualified Black or brown people. Well, if you only advertise in the Chronicle of Higher Ed or Inside Education or wherever you are picking to, you're right. You aren't going to get, because people are not there. But if you go to historically Black colleges, if you go to events and affinity groups, the engineering Black Association of Engineers. I can't remember what the acronym is right now. But if you don't go to those groups, you don't get those people.
No, you don't.
And so if you're going to argue for the reason why you aren't diverse is because you don't have people who are qualified, where have you gone to look for those people?
Absolutely. I agree with you completely. And if you're a recruiter, I'm speaking to anybody that's, in hiring, just generally that might happen upon our conversation. But if you're a recruiter and your hiring manager says to you, this is what I need, and they need to come from a Big Ten university,
right?
You have a responsibility to say, no, that's not how we humans should operate. If you recruit from the same places all the time, you get the same thing all the time. And we know that the more diverse your employment group is, the better off your organization is. Now, diverse is variety, and that's not only race, that's social class, that's religion, that's gender. There's so much more wrapped into diversity. But if that's the route that an organization chooses to go, then I don't buy we can't find these people.
I think we, as Black and brown people, we know that too. We know that, one of the things that I'm not sure how familiar you are with this term, but back in the day, it was called the Good Old Boys Club. Today we call that homosocial reproduction. I prefer to be with people who look and act and think like me. So you have all of those kinds of things. So even if the recruiter or the talent acquisition manager department has done their job, you don't know what the hiring manager's doing when you're not, on top of that person, right? So he or she may have their own friend that they already have for this job. They're just going through the motions so that they can meet all their requirements and do all the things that they're supposed to do. But in reality, they are not at the forefront of making sure that these things are legitimate, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation where I'm the hiring manager, and my supervisor, the person on top of me, said, one of my neighbors is looking for a job, and I think he or she would be a great candidate for this job. And you're sitting there thinking, that's not right. But you end up in the place where you really have very little choice but to hire someone that person is related to, and that's the other side of the lack of transparency in HR, is that any good work that the recruiter's doing can be undercut by the person who's doing the hiring, right? So you said, well, here are the top 10 candidates that are there. But then, the manager comes up with some reason why this person is not a good candidate, because he or she has an alternative agenda, right? That's not in keeping with HR. And it's very difficult to eliminate that bias.
It is, and organizations need to equip their recruiters, their human resources professionals, to have those really difficult conversations and say to you, if it's you that's saying, I want you to hire my neighbor because they're great, we've got to be able to equip our HR professionals, recruiters, sourcers, which people who might go out and find someone for a role, to have those conversations to say, well, no, because here's a more qualified individual, or group of individuals, or you don't want more of the exact same on your team because it's not going to benefit your team. What's missing from your team?
Exactly. But I think that's the challenge of diversity, right? And I do not like the word diversity, but it's a challenge of creating a broad and expanded workforce or work community, because we always are in that place where, it's always this crapshoot, right? So the other side of our argument, legitimately so, is getting into a job sometimes depends on who you know. And if you know someone who can do it. So now you manage to circumvent the ATS, right? You know somebody who knows. So if you looked at LinkedIn, for example, and they have a job out there, says you have 8 connections that work in this place, right?
Yep.
So you reach out to one of those connections. Hey, I see you guys have a opening for a fry cook at McDonald's. You know,
Right.
I'm really interested in that job, and so that then creates crinkles in the application process, and we are training people and teaching people to use your connections, create your community, because you may not make it through the ATS, or you may not make it off the desk of the HR person, but if you got a connection with that person, maybe he or she can give you a leg up, right? So all of these things are some massive amount of convolution that affect what happens in HR. But I will say, in my mind, and I do fully accept that I could be wrong, there is something wrong with HR that is so broken that I don't even know that even an ATS can fix it, because there's just no way you can look at an organization that has 40 or 50,000 employees and not see women and people of color in leadership roles and growing and getting promoted and being paid equitably, which is one of the reasons why I think HR stopped being transparent, or was never transparent, because you didn't want women to know how much their male colleagues were making sitting right beside you doing the exact same job, right?
Yep.
So you have all these pieces that are so intricately linked that breaking that link is almost like severing the head off the king. It's just too hard to do.
Yeah, I don't. I'm very uncomfortable blaming an ATS, because they're created by humans,
Yes.
right? So it's not the ATS's fault. That's the technology that's being used. And this is, I don't remember where the exact source of it. It was on Twitter. But there was a quote that has resonated with me, which goes back to this is my friend and they should get a job here. If we as an organization, wherever that organization is, are not intentionally inclusive of differences, then we are unintentionally exclusive.
Absolutely.
And I wish I could give credit to the original person who said that. I did go to the person who posted it initially and asked her where she got that, and she wasn't able to tell me. But we have to create, organizations have to create, HR has to create opportunities, pathways, and intentional access to jobs and transparency. Part of the work that I do now is dedicated to that, specifically for PTech, which is, for people who are unfamiliar with it, is a 6-year public high school education in conjunction with the receipt of a free associate's degree from the community college that's partnered with the Department of Education. And it is legislation that's passed in a state, so it doesn't exist in every single state. But the PTech schools the idea behind PTech schools is that they're established in traditionally underserved populations where there's less access to education beyond high school education. And it's a recognition that there are many pathways to get to whatever it is someone wants to achieve professionally, that there's not only one right way to get there.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think though, I admire people who work in HR, because I mean, all of us have hard jobs to do, it's not, but I do, I put something in the chat. I don't know if you saw it, but I put something in the chat about Google. So in 2015, Google released this facial recognition software.
Oh yeah.
And you said, well, you can't blame the ATS, you have to blame the people. I don't know how you separate the two, because the ATS is created by a person and is doing the
Right.
job that the person told it to do. So it's not
Right.
like it's become a smart system where it's starting to think like it's not a Watson, right? It's not an IBM Watson where it's learning and doing that, at least not yet, not for a lot of companies. There's still a system that was created by humans, managed by humans, updated by humans, and all that stuff. When Watson takes the world over, maybe we'll get to a place where all these things are not quite so vulnerable because it will learn. But the problem with it is that whenever you have, back in my day, it was called groupthink, or you have these things where people share a common philosophy or a common idea how things should be, you can expect that it's almost always going to go off the tracks, because we as humans are incredibly flawed. We bring all of our own biases and thoughts and ideas about how things should be to whatever work it is we're doing, whether we're an HR manager, a technologist, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever it is that you are, you bring yourself to that work, right? And if you haven't become, as young people say, woke, which I don't know what that means, but you're not, aware of what's happening around you, then you are subjected to bring that into whatever it is that you're doing, right? So a lot of the work that HR does, commendable work, right? Employee, research, rewards and recognitions, you work on pay increases, amazing work. The problem I have with HR as a whole is that you cannot justify behaviors that leave an entire society so misshapen that it doesn't even look like anything real. So it's white, male heavy. And you can pick any industry out there except for cleaning, janitorial services, all those low-skilled jobs. Yeah, HR assistant, damn proud of that. But you take almost any other industry, and it's misshapen to the point that it creates this thing that gets heavier and heavier and wider and male and male. And we are making progress. We are breaking through. But just the very fact that you've been in this field for 20 years and you're not in charge. Why not? Why not? You've got years of experience. You've been there and done that. So it's just someone giving you the opportunity to go and lead that organization. And so how do you do that? How do you correct behaviors that are structured, systematic, intentional? How do you correct that?
That's a bigger question than I have full capability of answering. I correct it for myself by deciding who I am, who I want to be, and doing work that matters to me. And at this point in my career, it's changed drastically. I think you heard me talk about the experience in healthcare and hiring there, and I've not hired executives in my current organization. I have in other organizations, and part of that's just due to size and structure. But my focus was always in higher level roles, like just under an executive. And that's shifted to like pre coming to work. It's how do we get high school students access to internships that give them the type of experience and exposure to know what to expect when they decide to enter the workforce in whatever way they want to enter the workforce. So for me, it's doing work that matters, designing, I don't want to say systems, but designing avenues to allow people that access. That's what it is for me, at least.
Well, I think, in a lot of ways, what you said makes perfectly good sense, but I do think you know what the answer is. I do think you know how to change it. You are in the place where you are and you're in the role that you are. And so it's important that in that role, you stay in the little box that someone has created and say, here's your job, Amanda. So this is what you're going to do. I think that in a lot of ways, it is important for women and people of color to recognize that you are not who someone defines you as. So if someone makes you the head of IT customer service, and you think, well, I reached nirvana, I'm there. you haven't, and we must be willing to engage and give people opportunities to really grow and become who they are. But then we must, so you said, who you are, where you want to be and all that stuff. But I would challenge you to go search any person out on the internet that's wildly successful. Do they have 20 years of experience before they became wildly successful, or did they become that in their 5th year, their 10th year, their 15th, whatever it is? For me, and I'm speaking only for me, women have such a hard road to climb to get to the place where they are equally accepted and recognized for what they bring to the table, regardless to what the criteria is, how open-minded, how friendly, how many benefits do they have. But when you look up high enough, if you can stretch your neck up that high and look, the person at the top is usually white and male. And I'll give you one example. And I talk about this thing so much, she probably gonna start charging me for saying it. But a woman that at American University came and spoke at my job, and she said, it's amazing. She said, I sit in meetings where I will say, it'd be really great if we created umbrellas on rainy days, and the room is crickets. A man comes in and says, on rainy days, we need umbrellas. And all of a sudden, oh my God, it's the greatest idea I've ever heard. Everybody's, Bob, I just didn't know you were going to come. I mean, that's just great, Bob. Thank you. And she named that, or coined that, heat, which I think is absolutely essential. It's absolutely true. So if you could imagine, and I'm going to stop talking now because I have one last question to ask you, and I'm going to leave the rest of the time to you. But if you could imagine that that's happening all over the world, not just in America, not just in Durham, or not just in DC or wherever, it's happening all over the world. The work to undo that, it must be monumental. Okay, so here's my one question. Do you believe that women and Black and brown and yellow and red people trust HR?
No.
Thank you. Now, I leave the remainder of the time to you to say whatever you wish to say, or tell us whatever we didn't cover, or whatever, or correct anything that I've said that you disagree with. So please.
Oh gosh, I didn't come prepared with any particular stump speech.
You always have your 3-minute elevator pitch ready.
Well, yeah, it depends. Depends on the audience. The elevator pitch changes, right? I think that that it's important for people to define success for themselves. And I consider myself successful. I don't do a great job of talking about all the great work that I do. And that is maybe it's a character flaw. It's something that I often explore, like why is that okay? So I would like to take the opportunity for people to recommend that people listen to your the video that you posted, or watch the video that you posted just before the holidays about the girl in the mirror.
Yep.
I really appreciated that. It's something that I think about often, but really appreciated that you took the time to take that exploration. We define ourselves, right? And we define our own success, but we have to sometimes rely on others to help us recognize that. It doesn't mean that somebody else defines you, but surrounding yourself with people that will challenge you to be the best version of yourself for whatever way you define it is important. And then something that's wildly important to me is mentoring and coaching. So I personally get great warm fuzzies for myself out of coaching, especially because mentoring, it's more telling people what to do. Like, here's how you do this. Here's how you write a resume, which hopefully those go away. But coaching itself is holding space for other individuals to help them answer the questions that they have and achieve the goals that they have, because they already have the answers for themselves. And so what gives me warm fuzzies is really being able to hold that space for other individuals. So I have to commit to myself to have more coaches and more mentors in my life.
Well, I'm going to be one of those. So I already signed myself up for that.
Awesome.
But I want to leave you with this. And I think you may know what I'm talking about since you mentioned the girl in the mirror. We are our harshest critics. We're harder on ourselves than anything society could do to us.
Yep.
And we fail because we get stuck in that. You know, a lot of people call that analysis paralysis, or you're constantly over analyzing yourself in something you did. So if you make a mistake, and I'll give you a good example. I have a colleague I work with. I haven't seen him in a number of years, but I work with him. And he made a massive blunder at work. I mean, it just really, I mean, like almost everybody in the organization knew he had made it, right? He went in, sat down with the leadership and said, hey, this is what happened. I fixed it, but this is what happened. He owned it and he thought nothing of it. You know, he said, I am human, I make mistakes. We as women, when we are so meticulous not to make that mistake. I mean, we dot every I, cross every T, go back and reread it, you know, and stuff like that. And I will tell you, when you get a little bit older, rereading it becomes harder because you miss, you know, those little words that you can't spell anymore. You know, glasses don't even help that. That's a mental thing, you know. But I will say that, you know, women specifically, and I don't care what ethnicity you are, women must give themselves a break. And we also must stand on each other's shoulders. We must become each other's community. We must become each other's benefactor, if you will, you know, advocate. You know, I heard you mention mentoring, which is a word, I don't even know what that one means either. But, you know, in a way, you know, that does something. So if I be imposed a job for chief data analytics a person, I can say, you know, I know somebody that works at IBM. Let me see if I can connect the two of you. Advocating for each other in a way that moves the needle, not just to sit there and say, okay, well, you know, here we go. There's a job out there I want, but I don't feel comfortable applying to it. And LinkedIn has this wonderful little tool in LinkedIn. So if you go out there and it's a, you know, I don't know how it gets in my feed, but I get all these jobs in my feed that are similar to the title I have. And it says, you have 7 connections that work at this place. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you for telling me. But what am I going to do with that? Right. So, you know, as you just said about the elevator, I have to build my own elevator speech or my own thought about that job. So just because you said this is a good job for me doesn't mean it's a good job for me. It just means it has a similar title, and it may be as challenging as anything, or it may be not right for me. So I think that women as a whole must be willing to be brave. We must be willing to not step and stand on the status quo always. We have to step on, we have to fall down. You have to scrape your knee. You have to go have that conversation with that little girl. Yes, you messed up. What made you think you were perfect? There's no one is. Admit that and move on instead of, you know, wallowing in it. Oh my God, I can't believe I do that. You know, I know my boss is going to think about me. I don't know. Let it go. Brene Brown says, assume grace for yourself as well. Assume grace. Give yourself permission to be human.
Absolutely. And my husband and I have a term when we start to go down that rabbit hole of, oh, I should have done this, or I should, like that worrying thing. So you have to listen closely to what I say, because I am not cursing.
Do I need to get the FCC regulation done here?
No, is stop shitting on yourself.
Amen. Amen.
We probably say that to each other multiple times a week, but it's something that sticks in my brain, is stop shitting on yourself. Absolutely. I should do this. I should have done that. Oh, well, what are you going to do right now? Right. And then how are you going to move forward? Yep. And I do want to acknowledge the reason I'm in the role that I'm in now is because of a woman that I worked with.
Amen. That's what I'm talking about.
Who I worked with in the Watson Health space, and in, you know, hiring, and she had moved into working in apprenticeship, and the external parts of that, with enabling apprenticeship in across the tech industry, especially in growing that. And she's the one who called me and said, hey, did you see this job? And I was like, why, what are you trying to sell me? Like, I don't understand, like, where are you making this connection? And it's because the job description didn't match what I was doing. and was not in a space that I had, was even familiar with at the time. And she took the time to say, I think you should check this out, and here's why. And it didn't end up being a sales pitch, even though she's an excellent salesperson. It wasn't a sales pitch, she meant it. And that's how I ended up working in the space that I'm in. So I do owe that to another woman.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. I will say, I'll tell you my quick little story. So, someone said to me, everybody know I want to be a CIO or a CTO. Everybody knows that's what I want to be. And I was talking to a colleague, and she says, you can't do that. You're not capable of doing that. You need some more experience on your belt now. So you got 20 years. I have been doing this since 1977. I was a part of that original IBM generation, when they had mainframes that was the size of football fields and all kinds of, air cooled rooms and all that stuff. I was there. I coded in some of the toughest languages, like people talk about Python and C++ and all these other things. Try writing code in assembler. Assembler is like pulling teeth with pliers. It's just isn't going to work. So but someone told me I couldn't. And then another female told me that. And then another woman said to me, she said, we all need a job beyond what we can do. We need to stretch. So if you get a job that does exactly what you do now, you're still where you are. You need to stretch. So that CIO job or that CTO job, as long as you believe you can do it, you can do it. It's only if you believe what they said that you cannot. And I have practiced that every single day of my life. So no one is going to tell me what I can and cannot do. I am going to do my very best every single day to deliver the best I can. And I know I am an outstanding human being. I'm not just your average old Black woman. I am an outstanding. I advocate, I work really hard. I give it everything I got. So the naysayers, keep on saying it. Keep on telling me what I cannot do. No, I don't buy it.
Absolutely. And don't we as women, statistically, we see this all the time. We as women look at a job description and talk ourselves out of like, this is all the stuff that I don't have. And then generally speaking, men will look at the same job description and apply to it, even if they don't have those items.
Absolutely.
And my advice to individuals when I have career conversations with them is if they can do everything in the job description and what they're looking for is growth, they're selling themselves short. Don't apply to that job. Like how is that different than what you're doing right now?
Preach. We'll get you a pulpit. Preach. That's it right there. That's really it. It's absolutely amazing.
So again, we need to decide who we are, right?
Absolutely. And we need to stop letting other noises inside our head. We got enough noises of our own. We don't need anybody else's to come to get more in there. So thank you so much for chatting with me on this Jury Friday evening. I should be sleeping about 10 minutes, but thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. As soon as the video converts, I'll send you a link, which probably means Monday, but if it converts before I go to bed, I'll send you a link. Please listen to it. Make sure you feel comfortable with what we've discussed here and let me know if I may upload it. And we're going to stay in touch. I have 2 emails for you, so I don't know which one you want me to use, but whichever one, we can talk about that offline. But, I will stay in touch and you stay in touch with me as well.
Please do. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for yours. It was just a wonderful conversation. Thank you. And go Michigan.
I started at Michigan State.
Is there a difference? Is it just Michigan? Is that just
Oh, Dr. Newton.
Just bothering you. That's all. Just bothering you. I know.
My mother graduated from the University of Michigan. She's unfortunately passed, but I started at Michigan State because I wanted to be a veterinarian. And that was the best place for me to go at the time. And I didn't finish there. I transferred schools, but the Wolverines and the Spartans will definitely.
Trust me, I know. I used to be a diehard Tom Brady fan. And I made the mistake of telling that to a Michigan State person. And literally they just got up and walked out the room. I'm like, well, good Lord, what did I say? But then I recognized the competitive between UNC and Duke. So if you tell somebody you're a UNC fan or a Duke fan, you're going to offend somebody. So, okay. What can I do? What can I do?
Yeah, I'll root for Michigan if they're playing anybody except Michigan State, and then I'll root for Michigan State.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I root for the referee in all sports. I don't go for any team. I like select players, but I don't have a team. My husband said that I've never lost a Super Bowl, a March Madness. He said I've never lost a game because I don't like the team. I like players on the team. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but thank you so much again, and I will be in touch. Stay safe, stay dry, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.